"Move your Audi, or I'll move it for you." That was the last thing Officer Wade Corrigan said to a parked car before he destroyed his own life. He didn't know whose car it was. He didn't care. And that, more than anything else, is why what happened next happened at all. Fairview County sat on either side of the Talbot River, like two different countries, pretending to share a bridge. North of the water, the lawns were cut in stripes, and the porch lights never flickered. South of the water, the street lights buzzed and cut out at random, and the same 4 police cruisers rotated through the same 6 blocks like sharks that had learned the shape of the tank. Marcus Sterling had grown up on the south side, in a 2-bedroom rental on Delacroix Street, sharing a bed with his younger brother until he was 14. Now, at 43, he sat behind a mahogany desk on the 4th floor of the Fairview County Courthouse, the newly elected district attorney of a county that had never elected anyone who looked like him before. He'd won with 61% of the vote and a single campaign promise, repeated at every church, basement, and union hall from one end of the county to the other. Accountability for everyone, no exceptions. He meant it. That was the problem. Wade Corrigan had been a patrolman for 16 years, and in that time he had accumulated something like a shadow file: 22 citizen complaints, excessive force, racial profiling, improper searches, all of them quietly absorbed by a department that had learned to treat paperwork as a kind of weather. You didn't fight it. You just waited for it to pass. Corrigan had a face like a closed fist and a habit of chewing tobacco until his teeth had gone the color of old piano keys, and he had hated Marcus Sterling from the moment the election results came in. Hated him with the specific, personal fury of a man who feels a door closing that he always assumed would stay open for him. It was a Tuesday in July, the kind of heat that made the asphalt look wet from a distance. Marcus had just come out of a 4-hour grand jury session on a city contractor, skimming from a road repaving fund, and he was tired in the particular way that comes from holding your face still for 4 hours while other people lie to you. He'd parked his own car, a navy blue Audi A6 he'd bought used, 6 years old, the one indulgence he allowed himself, in the county employee lot on Ashworth Street, a block from the courthouse. His parking placard sat on the dash, laminated, unmistakable. Corrigan rolled past in Cruiser 14 at 2:31 p.m., spit into a coffee cup wedged between his knees, and slowed to a stop behind the Audi. He already knew whose car it was. Everybody in the department knew Sterling drove a Navy Audi. He ran the plate anyway, watched the name blink onto his laptop screen. Sterling, Marcus D., and felt something ugly and satisfying settle into his chest. The rear tire sat maybe 2 inches over a faded white stripe that used to mark a fire lane, back when there was still a building on the other side of it to catch fire. That building had been rubble for 6 years. Nobody had repainted the line. To any reasonable officer, it was nothing, a non-issue, a rounding error in the geometry of a parking lot. To Corrigan, it was a gift. He didn't call it in through dispatch. That would leave a record. A supervisor might see it. Someone might ask why a county lot fire lane violation from a demolished building warranted a tow. Instead, he pulled out his personal cell phone and called a number he knew from memory. Pratt's Towing. Duke. It's Wade. Got a live one on Ashworth, right behind the courthouse, blocking a fire lane. There was a wet, satisfied chuckle on the other end. Courthouse lot? That's ballsy even for you, Wade. Just hook it and send it to the far yard, full storage rate. You got it, brother. Corrigan sat in his idling cruiser and watched Duke Pratt's rusted flatbed grind up the block. 20 minutes later, watched the winch bite into the Audi's front axle. Watched $11,000 of German engineering get dragged backward up a steel ramp with a shriek that Corrigan would later describe, to no one who asked, as satisfying. He didn't write a citation. He didn't leave a notice on the windshield. He spat his tobacco into the gutter, put the cruiser in drive, and told himself he'd just won something. He had no idea he'd just lit a fuse that would burn for exactly 144 days before it reached him. At 6:12 p.m., Marcus Sterling walked out of the courthouse loosening his tie, already 3 steps into tomorrow's schedule in his head, and turned the corner onto Ashworth Street to find a rectangle of empty, oil-stained pavement where his car should have been. He stood there for 4 full seconds without moving. Then he looked down. 2 fresh, deep gouges were carved into the soft asphalt, winch marks, unmistakable, still sharp at the edges. He didn't shout. He didn't kick the curb. He pulled out his phone and dialed the non-emergency line with the flat, procedural calm of a man who has spent 20 years learning that calm is the only weapon that never runs out of ammunition. Fairview, County Dispatch, this is Operator 12. This is District Attorney Marcus Sterling. I need to know if a vehicle was impounded from the Ashworth Street lot this afternoon. Plate is Delta Foxtrot 618. A pause. Keys clicking. Then the voice came back different, tighter. Sir, yes, that vehicle was towed at 2:31 p.m. Authorizing officer was, another pause, longer this time, Officer Wade Corrigan, badge 51. Cited violation, obstruction of a designated fire lane. Marcus already knew that name. It was near the top of a file on his desk, a file he had asked his staff to compile 2 months earlier and hadn't yet had time to open properly. Which lot did they take it to? Pratt's Towing, out on Route 9, sir. Thank you. He didn't call the police chief. He didn't demand a courtesy ride from a squad car. He opened a rideshare app on his phone and requested a car the way any other citizen of Fairview County would have had to. The ride out to Route 9 took 38 minutes through the kind of industrial sprawl that exists at the edge of every county. Chain-link fences, topped in razor wire, the smell of diesel and standing water. Pratt's Towing sat behind a gate with a hand-painted sign, and inside a stifling trailer office, behind a scratched sheet of plexiglass, a heavy-set man in grease-stained coveralls looked up from a folded newspaper. Help you. I'm here for my vehicle. Navy Audi A6. Duke Pratt tapped at an ancient keyboard. Yeah, fire lane obstruction. That's a $200 hook fee, $90 for the dolly, $65 for overnight storage. Comes to $355. Cash only. It hasn't been overnight. It's been 4 hours. After 5 p.m. counts as overnight county ordinance. Pratt was grinning now, enjoying himself. $355. Through the cracked door behind Pratt, Marcus could see a small back office with a folding chair and a mini fridge. Wade Corrigan sat in that chair, a can of beer sweating in his hand, watching through the gap in the door with the loose, satisfied posture of a man enjoying a show he'd paid for himself. When their eyes met, Corrigan raised the can 2 inches in a mock toast and let a slow grin spread across his face. Marcus held his gaze for exactly 3 seconds. Then he reached into his jacket, counted out $355 in cash, and slid it under the plexiglass slot. I need an itemized, stamped receipt and a copy of the police tow authorization. Whatever you say, counselor. Pratt snatched the bills, printed a crumpled slip, and shoved it through the slot along with a release form. Outside in the dirt lot, Marcus circled his own car slowly before getting in. Fresh scratches gouged the front bumper where the winch chain had bitten in wrong. He took out his phone and photographed all of it. The scratches, the plate, the receipt, the lot, the gate, with the unhurried thoroughness of a man building a file, because that is exactly what he was doing. As he pulled out of the gate, Corrigan was leaning against his cruiser in the last orange light of the evening, arms crossed, still grinning. Marcus didn't scowl. He didn't roll down the window. He simply looked at him the way you'd look at a fire alarm that had gone off for no reason, a small, contained, private kind of attention, and drove away. Corrigan thought he'd won a street fight. He had no way of knowing that Marcus Sterling did not fight in the street. He fought in rooms with transcripts. Notice this. The receipt. $355, cash, folded once, and slid into Marcus's shirt pocket that night instead of his wallet. Remember where it ends up. By 7 a.m. The next morning, the fourth floor of the DA's office was running at a frequency nobody in the building had ever heard before. Quiet, fast, and completely without small talk. Marcus had summoned his chief investigator, Renee Okafor, a former FBI forensic accountant, who had left the bureau for what she'd hoped would be a quieter life, and instead found herself perpetually irritated by how much local corruption went unexamined simply because nobody bothered to add up the numbers. He slid the receipt and the photographs across his desk. Officer Wade Corrigan had my car illegally towed yesterday. Renee raised an eyebrow. He towed the district attorney's car. It's not arrogance, Marcus said. It's an illusion of invulnerability. Those are different diseases. He did it because he thinks the badge means nobody can touch him. What I want to know is why he called a specific tow company by name instead of going through city dispatch. You think there's a kickback? I know there's a kickback. A patrolman doesn't build a personal relationship with a specific tow yard out of nowhere. Pull every tow authorization Corrigan has signed in the last 5 years. Cross-reference everyone against Pratt's towing. Then run a full financial workup on Duke Pratt. The company, the LLC, every name attached to it. Renee sat back. If we open this door, the union's going to declare war on this office. They'll slow-walk every subpoena we send them for the next 4 years. Let them. Marcus's voice didn't rise. I was elected to clean this up. If it costs us the department's cooperation, we'll build the case without it. For 3 weeks, a room in the courthouse basement became a war room that officially did not exist. Only Marcus, Renee, and 2 paralegals had keys. What they found, spread across 3 walls in red pushpins and printer paper, made Marcus physically sick the first time he saw it laid out whole. Over 5 years, Corrigan had authorized 1,211 vehicle tows. 91% of them went to Pratt's towing, completely bypassing the county's official rotation list of licensed operators. But it was the map that did it. Renee had pinned a printed street map of Fairview County to the wall and marked every tow with a red dot. The north side, white, wealthy, gated, was nearly blank. The south side was a wound. He's hunting. The south side, Renee said, tracing a cluster over the Delacroix housing complex, 3 blocks from the house Marcus had grown up in. Single mothers, shift workers, people with no time to fight a ticket and no money to fight a tow. He writes up violations that don't exist, blocked sidewalks that aren't blocked, expired tags that aren't expired, and calls Duke Pratt every time. And if they can't pay the fee, after 30 days, Pratt files an abandonment claim, auctions the car, sometimes just scraps it. Renee slid a printout across the table. But here's the part that changes everything, Marcus. I pulled the corporate filing on Pratt's Towing LLC. Duke Pratt isn't the sole owner. 50% equity sits with a shell company called Silverline Holdings. And Silverline Holdings is registered to a woman named Denise Pratt, his wife. His wife, whose maiden name, Renee let it land, is Denise Corrigan. She's Wade Corrigan's younger sister. The pieces locked together with an audible click in Marcus's chest. This wasn't a bad cop having a bad week. It was a family business. Corrigan stole the cars under color of law. His brother-in-law held them hostage. The profits went straight back into Corrigan's own household through his sister's paperwork. Over 5 years, they'd pulled close to $900,000 out of the poorest neighborhoods in the county. This isn't a misconduct complaint, Marcus said quietly. This is racketeering, extortion under color of official right, wire fraud, civil rights violations. If we take this to a county grand jury, it leaks before lunch. Captain Doyle's got friends in the clerk's office. So what do we do? Marcus picked up his phone. We go over all of them. He dialed the direct line of David Reyes, the lead federal prosecutor for the district. David, I've got a package for you. A localized RICO conspiracy inside the Fairview Police Department. Financial trail, corporate structure, a clear pattern targeting minority neighborhoods. How big, Marcus? Big enough to end careers. I need Title III wiretaps on 3 lines, and I need them fast. Somewhere out on Route 9, Wade Corrigan was telling a coworker over a beer that the DA hadn't even filed a complaint about the tow. Wade Corrigan thought that meant he'd won. Corrigan's confidence, once fed, does not stay quiet. 2 weeks after the tow, he pulled over Maya Whitfield, Marcus's chief of staff, on a rainy Thursday evening. It was a stop with no legitimate cause. A taillight he claimed was out, though it wasn't, and he walked up to her window with his flashlight aimed directly into her eyes, longer than necessary, the beam trembling slightly as if he enjoyed watching her flinch. License and registration. What's the reason for the stop, officer? Taillight. He leaned in close enough that she could smell stale tobacco on his breath. You work for Sterling, don't you? I do. Tell your boss to watch where he parks. His voice dropped, soft and almost friendly, which made it worse. Streets are dangerous. Bad things happen to nice cars. He didn't write a ticket. He walked away laughing under his breath, leaving Maya sitting in the rain with her hands shaking on the wheel. Not from fear exactly, but from the specific cold fury of being threatened by someone wearing a badge that was supposed to mean the opposite of threat. When she reported it to Marcus the next morning, he didn't raise his voice. He just nodded once, slowly, the way a man nods when a puzzle piece finally slides into place. Corrigan was digging his own grave one shovel load of arrogance at a time. He just didn't know yet how deep the hole already was. For the next 2 months, federal agents sat in an unmarked van half a mile from Pratt's towing, listening in real time as Wade Corrigan called in fabricated violations, laughed about which neighborhoods to hit next, and asked his brother-in-law, more than once, for his cut of the cash. Every word went onto a federal recording. There were no gaps. There was nowhere left to run. On a cold Monday morning in October, at exactly 6 a.m., 3 black SUVs rolled simultaneously into 3 different driveways across Fairview County. There were no local sirens, no courtesy call to the department, no warning at all. Wade Corrigan was jolted awake by the sound of his own front door being torn off its hinges, a sound he had delivered one way or another to dozens of people over 16 years and never once imagined hearing directed at himself. FBI. Federal warrant. Hands where we can see them. He scrambled up in his boxer shorts, reaching instinctively for the service weapon on his nightstand, and froze the instant 3 rifles came level with his chest. Don't even think about that gun, the lead agent barked. Hands on your head. Turn around. Hold on. Hold on. I'm Fairview PD. I'm on the job. You've got this wrong. We know exactly who you are. Special Agent Gregory Nash stepped into the room holding a thick folder. Wade Corrigan, you're under arrest for violation of the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, extortion under color of official right, and deprivation of civil rights under color of law. The color drained out of Corrigan's face the way water drains from a tub, all at once, and then completely gone. RICO. Federal charges. This wasn't internal affairs. This wasn't a sympathetic chief burying a complaint in a drawer. This was the Department of Justice, and it did not make things disappear. Out on Route 9, federal agents tore through Pratt's towing, seizing computers, filing cabinets, and $81,000 in cash from a hidden floor safe. Duke Pratt didn't even make it to the handcuffs before he started asking for a deal. By 8 a.m., word had reached Chief Harold Voss, red-faced, 22-year veteran, who had personally signed off on burying at least 6 of Corrigan's earlier complaints. He stormed past the reception desk into Marcus's office without knocking. What in God's name is going on, Marcus? The feds just perp-walked one of my senior officers out of his own house in his underwear. You went around my whole chain of command. Marcus finished signing a motion, capped his pen, and looked up. Sit down, Harold. Or don't. But lower your voice. You brought the FBI into my department over a parking dispute. I brought the FBI into your department because you let a criminal enterprise operate out of your own precinct for 5 years. Marcus stood, lifted a thick-bound folder off his desk, and set it down in front of the chief with a heavy, deliberate thud. That's a 5-year forensic accounting of Corrigan's towing history. Over 1,000 vehicles. $900,000 extorted from the poorest people in this county, funneled through his sister's shell company. He didn't just tow my car, Harold. He's been terrorizing the South Side under your watch, and I have every word of it on a federal wiretap. Voss stared at the folder. The fight went out of his shoulders like air out of a tire. The union will. The union already told me an hour ago they will not be funding his defense. Marcus leaned forward. He's alone, Harold. Completely alone. I told you I was going to clean this county up. Corrigan was the infection. This is the amputation. Down in a federal holding cell, Wade Corrigan sat on a steel bench for the first time in his adult life, with absolutely no power to change what happened next. The trial did not last long. It didn't need to. For 3 days, federal prosecutor David Reyes walked a parade of victims through the courtroom. A laid-off shift worker who'd lost her job because she couldn't get to work without a car, a retired school teacher whose only vehicle had been auctioned off for $400, a college student who'd drained her savings account paying storage fees on a car that had never actually broken any law. But the blow that finished Corrigan wasn't the victims. It was his own brother-in-law. Duke Pratt took the stand in an ill-fitting suit, refusing to look at the defense table even once, and detailed the entire operation from the first tow to the last. The coded phone calls, the cash handed over in folded envelopes at Sunday cookouts while children played in the yard 20 feet away. And finally, the ledger. His wife had kept a handwritten notebook hidden beneath a floorboard, logging every fabricated violation and every split of cash for 5 straight years. It went into evidence as Exhibit 41. Then, Reyes played the wiretap. Corrigan's own recorded voice filled the courtroom, dripping with a casual, boastful contempt that made several jurors visibly flinch. Got another live one for you, Duke. Cypress Gardens. Little silver Civic, parked legal tags are good, but I'm writing it up as blocking a hydrant. Let her ride the bus a couple weeks. Think about her choices. Hit her with the max on storage. Denise wants that new deck before Labor Day. A woman in the second row of the gallery put her hand over her mouth. Marcus sat perfectly still in the front row, his face unreadable, his eyes fixed on the defense table, where Wade Corrigan had gone completely rigid. The next morning, before his own lawyer could deliver an opening statement, Corrigan changed his plea to guilty on every federal count. The criminal case was over. Marcus's second war, the one that would actually change the county, was only beginning. As a sitting DA, Marcus was legally barred from filing a civil suit himself, but his law school roommate, Harrison Cole, ran a civil rights practice with no such restriction. And the moment Corrigan's plea hit the federal record, Marcus made sure Cole received the entire unsealed evidence file. Cole filed a massive class action against the city, the police department, and Wade Corrigan, personally, built entirely on judicially validated federal evidence. The city's lawyers looked at the file for 11 minutes before recommending settlement. Within 6 weeks, Fairview County agreed to pay $6.1 million into a restitution fund for the victims, and, buried inside the settlement's fine print, a non-negotiable requirement. The county would immediately fund an independent civilian oversight board with full subpoena power, the exact institution the old political establishment had blocked for a decade. Chief Harold Voss didn't wait to be pushed out. He cleared his office at night and filed for early retirement before the ink on the settlement had dried. And then came the part that finally broke something inside Wade Corrigan that had never been broken before. Because his federal felonies had been committed explicitly under color of law, a state tribunal convened a punitive hearing under a statute almost nobody remembered existed. In less than 20 minutes, Corrigan was stripped of his entire police pension. Every dollar he'd paid in across 16 years, seized and redirected into the restitution fund for the people he'd spent that career extorting. He had nothing left, no savings, no pension, no safety net waiting for him on the other side of a sentence. At his formal sentencing, Corrigan stood in an orange jumpsuit before federal judge Eleanor Vance, 20 years older, looking than he had been 4 months earlier. "Mr. Corrigan," she said, her voice cold and level, "a badge is not a license. It is a trust, extended by the public, at extraordinary risk to themselves. You did not protect and serve this community. You hunted it. You specifically targeted people you believed had no voice, no money, and no way to fight back. And you did it for a cedar deck." She let the silence sit before she continued. "You believed the badge made you untouchable. Let this sentence remind anyone who wears one that the law is a very heavy thing to have fall on you." She sentenced him to 144 months, 12 years, in federal prison, with no possibility of early release. As 2 federal marshals took him by the arms, Corrigan looked back once, over his shoulder, and found Marcus's eyes in the packed gallery. Marcus didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He gave a single, slow nod, the closing of a file, nothing more, and picked up his briefcase to leave. The cell door on Corrigan's new life closed with a flat, mechanical finality he would spend years failing to get used to. Because of his status as a former officer, he couldn't be placed in general population. The risk was too high. So he went into a segregated unit, 23 hours a day in a room the size of a walk-in closet, a narrow slit of frosted glass, letting in a dull wash of daylight that told him nothing about the world outside it. For the first 18 months, he fought. Appeals, motions, claims of selective prosecution, all of them denied. The evidence was simply too complete, the wiretap too clean, his own voice too clearly his own voice. After that, he stopped fighting and started writing letters, mostly to no one, mostly never sent. 5 years passed. Fairview County looked almost unrecognizable by then. Crime had leveled off. Trust between the South Side and the department, for the first time in living memory, was measurably improving, according to the Oversight Board's own published data. Marcus Sterling won re-election with 83% of the vote and was already being talked about, quietly, and then not so quietly, as a future candidate for state attorney general. Maya Whitfield, the woman Corrigan had once threatened in the rain, now ran a task force dedicated to reopening cold civil rights cases. Inside the federal correctional facility, 5 years had stripped Wade Corrigan down to something smaller than he used to be. His hair had gone gray and thin. His shoulders, once broad enough to fill a doorway, had curved inward. Having exhausted every appeal the law allowed him, he did the only thing he had left. He asked a guard for a pen and a single sheet of paper, and he wrote to the one man who could still change anything about the rest of his life. The letter that arrived on Marcus's desk was a masterpiece of careful, incomplete remorse. Corrigan didn't apologize for what he'd done to the people he'd extorted. He apologized that things had gotten out of hand. He wrote about the mental toll of 5 years in isolation. He asked Marcus, as one man of faith to another, to write a letter of support to the parole board. A few years shaved off, in exchange for a promise to leave the county and never come back. Maya carried the envelope into Marcus's office herself and set it on his desk without a word. Marcus read it once, in total silence, his expression never changing. "What does he want?" Maya asked. "A recommendation for a sentence reduction. Says he's learned his lesson." Marcus set the letter down and looked out the window at the county, moving in its slow, ordinary rhythm 4 floors below. He thought about the map, with the red dots clustered over Delacroix Street. He thought about a woman riding a bus for 3 weeks because her car had been stolen out from under her by a man with a badge. He thought about a receipt for $355, cash only, folded once and kept in a drawer for 5 years because some part of him had always known it would matter again. He opened the bottom drawer of his desk and found the archival file marked United States v. Corrigan. Inside, behind the wiretap transcripts and the forensic ledgers, was a single photocopy, the original Pratt's towing receipt, grease-stained at one corner, the ink slightly faded now. He took a black marker and wrote 3 words across the top. Denied. Serve your time. He didn't write anything else. He folded the copy, sealed it in a fresh envelope, and handed it back to Maya. Mail it. Then closed the file. We're done with Wade Corrigan. When the envelope reached the prison, Corrigan tore it open with hands that hadn't stopped hoping until that exact second. He unfolded the photocopy, read the 3 words across the top, and felt the last thin thread of anything he'd been holding onto simply give way. The paper slipped out of his fingers and landed on the concrete floor. He sat down on the edge of his steel bunk, put his face in his hands, and, for the first time in 5 years, let himself understand, not just know, but actually feel, that he had traded everything he had for the momentary pleasure of watching a man he hated stand in an empty parking lot. That evening, as the sun went down orange and gold over the courthouse dome, Marcus Sterling walked out through the front doors, down the steps, and into the Ashworth Street lot. The old fire lane markings had long since been repainted into clean, ordinary parking stalls. He unlocked the same Navy Audi, repaired, the scratches long buffed out, and slid into the driver's seat. No cruiser idled at the curb watching him. No one ran his plate out of spite. There was only the quiet hum of the engine, the ordinary hush of a street that had, slowly and without ceremony, become just a street again. He pulled out onto Ashworth and merged into traffic, one more car among many, going home.